That was the trailer for Relic. Relic is a mixed genre game with elements from RTSs, MOBAs, and God games. It takes influences from various games, including Dota 2, League of Legends, Black and White 2, and From Dust. When we set out to make Relic, we had three goals in mind. First, we wanted the player to feel like a god, with power over their followers and control over the world, similar to the player experience in the Black and White series. Second, we wanted to abstract unit control, so the units would act intelligently without the player micromanaging them. The player would simply give the AI an objective, and the AI would work out the rest. In this way, the player should be able to think on a grander scale and command multiple fronts simultaneously. Finally, we wanted to include a feature which is not often used in RTSs, terrain deformation. Terrain deformation is when the player is allowed to add in hills, valleys, and plains over the course of the game to manipulate the landscape. In this way, they can disrupt troop movement, block paths, or create new paths through mountains. This gives the player a great sense of control over the landscape. However, it's very difficult to balance this control and power with challenging gameplay.
The gameplay of Relic centers around the player directing the avatar character and the friendly troops called the Aetherians to battle against the evil Gremlocks. The avatar is directly controlled by the player. He is the Aetherian god who is sent to them in human form, so he's the most powerful unit, he has the most amount of health, and he deals the most amount of damage. The avatar can be utilized by the player to capture resources on the map, to fight the enemy, or to destroy enemy towers. Since a major part of our gameplay was terrain deformation, we came up with the idea for these miracle powers, which would allow the player to deform the terrain. Each miracle power is associated with a relic artifact on the map, and there are a total of 4 relics that coincide with the 4 different miracle powers. Once a player captures a relic, they earn that miracle power associated with it. There are a total of 3 main terrain modifying miracles, including a volcano, a meteor drop miracle, then we have a flood miracle, and lastly we have a heal miracle, which doesn't actually deform the terrain, but it heals any friendly troops within the casting area. Although the enemy Gremlocks are controlled by the game's strategic AI, your Aetherian allies are under the influence of these rally flags, which are flags that are placed and controlled by the player on the map in order to dictate friendly troop movement. A player can place a flag on the map, and any available Aetherian troops will path directly to the closest rally flag, and any troops spawning from the barracks will be directed to do the same. Placing rally flags is a vital aspect of our gameplay and strategy. Now we're going to talk about the art and audio in our game. The style of our game is medieval fantasy. We spend a lot of our time coming up with a distinct color palette and style for each of our opposing sides, the Gremlocks and the Aetherians. We also took style and art influence from other similar RTS and MOBA games.
The environment in Relic makes use of Unity's terrain system to generate the battlefield. It is carefully sculpted to make it look believable. The world makes use of entirely original assets, including hand-painted textures and environmental models, including a variety of ferns, trees, and shrubs. These textures blend with each other to signify subtle transitions between the various areas on the map, such as your home base, the enemy base, and Relic locations. The placement of textures in environment models also serves to make structures blend with the environment much easier, making them fit the context of the world. Relic also features a vertical reorchestration system which makes use of 3 separate stems. Stems are a series of music tracks of instruments, and these 3 stems are muted and unmuted depending upon the player's location on the map. These 3 stems are a high stem, which includes high drums, strings, and harp, a mid stem, which includes organ, guitar, and bass, and a low stem, which includes a deep taco drum and a brass section. Closer to the player's spawn, just the high stem plays to give a more relaxed feel to the game, but as they move out into the world, the mid stem is unmuted to pick up the pace, and when they enter the enemy base, the high stem is muted and the low stem is unmuted to convey a sense of danger. By using the stem system, it adds to the immersion, giving certain areas of the map not only visual flavor, but auditory flavor as well. This technique has been previously used in games such as Banjo-Kazooie and Legend of Zelda. Relic makes use of a massive selection of audio samples which gives feedback, a sense of immersion, and overall complete the game's feel. Some examples of this audio include crowd sounds that grow louder as a group of infantry grows larger. Casting Meteor Miracle makes use of simulated 3D audio, which once cast, the player will hear the meteor fall from the top of the screen and onto the battlefield. And whenever either side captures a relic, different sounds are played to tell the player that a relic has been captured. These are just a few examples of our diverse audio library.
The use of audio and sound effects in our game also has an important technical component. One of the issues that we had to deal with was controlling the number of instances of each sound being played at any particular time. When you have more than a couple of units in the middle of combat, all attacking at the same time, the number of sword clashes and grunts can get overwhelming pretty quickly. So we developed a singleton class that takes in requests from other objects to play each sound. It then decides whether or not to play that sound based on the number of current instances. As you can see in this diagram, a unit requests a sound and the sound might or might not be played. One of the most important gameplay features in our game is the ability for the player to dynamically modify the terrain at playtime. In order to create an immersive experience, we had to try to make the terrain deformation look natural. It was pretty simple for us, the programmers, to raise or lower the terrain, and then we could try to smooth it out using different mathematical functions. But as you can see, this turned out to look pretty unrealistic. So what we ended up doing was having the artist create a grayscale image that represents a height map of the terrain deformation. And there's a feature in Unity that lets us take that grayscale image and create a terrain object from it. We could then save that object into a prefab, and any time that the player wants to modify the terrain, we can just read in the height values from that object and use those to change the landscape. Another issue that we had to keep into consideration throughout the development of our project was the fact that having dynamic terrain modification has a pretty big impact on pathfinding.
Throughout the project, pathfinding proved to be a challenge. We needed some way to abstract the terrain data so that the units knew where there was a giant hole in the ground and where the roads were. In order to do that, we overlaid this graph, which changes as the terrain changes. In that way, we knew that if the units stayed pretty close to the graph, they would act in a fairly intelligent manner as they moved around the map. As the number of units grew, we started grouping them into squads. Squads are comprised of leaders and followers. The white text you see is the leader, and the units themselves are the followers. As the units and the leaders and the followers use state machines to move around the map. This is the state machine that the leader uses. It's a simple 3-state state machine that keeps the leader on the path unless the followers fall too far behind or the player starts moving the objective, in which case it waits. This is the follower state machine, which has it just moving directly towards the leader unless there's an enemy nearby, in which case it'll go attack the enemy and then come back to the leader again. In that way, we get this natural movement where the leader is far in front of the units and the units move at full speed to catch up to the leader until they arrive at their objective. The blue flags that you see are the objectives for the Aetherian squads. Whenever a squad is created, it is assigned to one of the two blue flags, and for its entire duration moves paths directly towards that flag. The Gremlocks work under a similar system, except the flags are invisible, and the Gremlock AI determines where they go.